district.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Clerk, if you will please call the roll and read the prepared statement.
April 23, 2019. Please be advised, this meeting is being taped for audio and video broadcast. The meeting will also be closed captioned. It's important that everyone speak clearly into the microphones and only one person speak at a time. Assisted listening devices are available. Mr. Burnett.
Present.
Mr. Corsello.
Here.
Mr. Hostin.
Here.
Mr. Sacchinelli.
Present.
Ms. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Melendez.
Present.
Mr. Ioannidis.
Present.
Mr. Dumas.
Present.
Ms. Young.
Here.
Mr. Kides.
Here.
Ms. Siegelbaum.
Here.
Mr. Hempstead.
Here.
Mr. Serenidis.
Here.
Mr. Igneri.
Here.
Mr. Livingston.
Here.
15 present. You have a quorum.
15 present. Next item on the agenda, the acceptance of the minutes of the regular meeting of April 9th, 2019. Do I have a motion?
Motion?
Motion by Ms. Young. Are there any corrections, deletions, additions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, public participation.
There's a 3-minute maximum on comments, and please be aware that you must be speaking on an issue that is on the agenda for this evening. Mr. Leonard Raymond?
Yes, good evening, council members, Mr. Mayor, and others. My name is Leonard Brayman. I'm with the firm of Wassi Rosen, and we represent Our House, a bar at 112 Washington Street in Norwalk, and we're here to speak on proposed amendments to the noise ordinance. We support changes in the noise ordinance, but we want to make sure that they're fair to everyone, including bar and restaurant owners and patrons in the Washington Street area of South Norwalk, which is, after all, the city's entertainment district, and creates tremendous value for the city. I've passed out a handout. I apologize if I don't have enough copies for everyone present. But I think to make the noise ordinance more fair for everyone, including for Washington Street, we are proposing modest changes to Table 3 and Footnote 2 of the draft ordinance that appears in your packet. And that's the table that sets forth the decibel level limits and times of day for the Washington Street Development District. I tried to summarize a lot of information in this chart. That's the first page of your handout. And the second row in that chart is the time limits for when the 35 decibel level limit begins for the Washington Street Development District on different days of the week. Currently, in the current draft, 10 p.m. Sunday through Wednesday, 11 p.m. Thursday, and Friday and Saturday nights, 1 a.m. And the city's noise consultant, Mr. Zwerling, referred to this limit as last call for music. In other words, it's effectively a limit for an affected person of in the area at which the music really has to be shut off, and that's how he reached his measurement of 35 decibels. He measured it when the music was off, in between songs. So this really is a restricted level. And in fact, federal OSHA guidelines, if you look at the second page of the handout, considers 35 decibels to be lower than a soft whisper 5 feet away. The state liquor law, however, defines last call for alcohol as 1 a.m. Weeknights and 2 a.m. Weekend nights. So that's a judgment by the state legislature that businesses and bars and restaurants should be able to be open, to serve alcohol, to entertain their patrons until those hours of night. And currently, Sunday through Wednesday, you have last call for music a full 3 hours before last call for alcohol. What we propose is a modest change, and that's on the third row of this chart in the green. We propose to push back last call for music until 11 p.m.
Mr. Brauman, you're now at 3 minutes. Could you wrap it up, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 11 p.m. on Sunday through Wednesday, 12 a.m. Thursday, and to keep it 1 a.m. on Friday and Saturday. The third part of our handout is a petition signed by 141 individuals who want to keep the music vibrant in South Norwalk and allow bars and restaurants to play music until a reasonable time before last call for alcohol. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Greenwood.
Straight.
Good evening, everyone. Mayor Elizabeth Greenwood from Osborne Avenue. I'm here to speak about Chapter 68, the noise ordinance. And where I live on Osborne, I'm about the distance from me here to the end over there where the mayor is. That to me distanced from my window to the river. And the pilings, they are stating of doing a work on the pilings of low tide. And so low tide could be any time. Could be 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. So that means you're going to allow that work to be done for the pilings at low tide when we're sleeping. And I'm that close to, and everyone in my complex at Osborne Avenue is that close to the water. That's going to be very extreme for everyone like myself who lives on the water there. So we're asking that there be some adjustment to that factor of the low tide drilling on the pilings, because I'm legally blind, and if I don't sleep well, I can't see well. And I know for other people, not being visually impaired can be the same way. So I'm asking that be taken in consideration the elements of people's living and peacefully. Thank you.
Thank you.
John Flynn.
Hi, I'm Johnny Flynn at 27 Queen Park. I came to speak about the ethics part, which is not on the agenda. But
Mr. Flynn, if it's not on the agenda,
I understand.
it's policy, council policy to speak on it. Thank you.
Fine. But when I took the liberty of getting another, I'm going to speak about the 68 noise
Okay,
ordinance.
very good. Thank you.
Okay, so in my hand, I have another police report from the weekend. I came to the meeting last week. And if you look at the list, the noise ordinance, last week there were 10 noise complaints per night. This week there's 9. But if you look at the police log, not a single complaint, the last 60 I checked, generated a police report. So if we're not enforcing the noise complaints, why are we adjusting the code in the first place? And B, why don't the police record the addresses of the noise complaints or document anything? So in other words, we're changing law enforcement's role in noise complaints. However, what's the point if they don't enforce it, like they don't enforce zoning or the ethics board, or, you know, I can go on for 20 minutes about what they don't enforce. But the fact is, the police reports, 9 in 3 hours, show noise complaints basically at Eli, Cedar Court, I'm guessing because it's Rudner Court, you know, it happens to be the Water Street again. The construction units that don't do soundproofing, which are HUD, Trinity Financial, Day Street is on here. So these are the problems. We're putting people in homes that are not built for the sound. You know, Elizabeth just spoke. The pile driver is in the hundreds of decibels, and it travels 3 miles. So if there's an ordinance, yes, they have a permit, they're going to be doing this at 3 o'clock in the morning, I can identify with her having problems. I'll be able to, I heard the test pilings at my house 10 blocks away. So, you know, I don't have much else to say except that, you know, we're not enforcing any law here. And I have a hard time thinking why we're even changing all these codes. Is it for our protection? No. It's so that you can get out of enforcing the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn.
Diane Lauricella.
Good evening. I'm going to speak tonight about Chapter 68, the noise ordinance, mainly. The key here is keeping your own noise within the constructs of your home, your bar, your restaurant, your contractor yard, your school construction area. That is the key for those people who aren't familiar with some of the technicalities about noise control. I'm very happy that this discussion has taken place. I was really happy during the ordinance committee that some of the council discussed the value of the health being very important, especially, and I thank them for that, because that's the key. But I do want to ask a quick question that I hope in discussion you will ask or you will answer, and that is under on the second or third page under affected person, it's in red on your copy, that the affected person is the person filing the complaint. What's not clear as to whether the police, who currently are being tasked with enforcement, can they initiate an enforcement action without a person actually filing a complaint? For instance, if they see obvious, very loud noise, can they be proactive? That's something that wasn't clear, and we had talked about it in the past. There also is missing the idea of effective buffers and retrofitting to keep that noise in that emitter's, the noise producer or emitter's site. And that is something that could be added later. Maybe it could be added through zoning and the building department, but effective buffers, especially in the case of South Norwalk Citizens for Justice, where we have abutting properties, not abutting different zones, not mixed use. Mixed use is a whole different animal, and that needs to be discussed as well. I want to emphasize the retrofitting as an amendment or modify the waiver form to include what forms of buffering and retrofitting are you adding to your site. We can do this if we want. There also needs to be a robust and creative public education program after this is passed. I stand ready to help with that. The issue of leaf blowers, I don't believe, has been changed to ban leaf blowers being used from Sunday morning until noon. I think that would be a nice compromise. There was discussion about this. Especially when you have 3 going at once, it violates the current noise ordinance. And a special appropriation to begin immediately training and new equipment, including redundant equipment that is a backup, would help immensely.
You're at 3 minutes.
Okay, I'll wrap up right now. My comment about the police's role, I wanted to set right for the record. It was taken a bit out of context. The police in our city are wonderful, but their enforcement duties on noise have been less so. I believe they need more support, and they need more training about how to effectively communicate the needs of the citizenry and the businesses. I know they can do better with additional support, but they currently have equipment, and they say they've been trained on that equipment. And they need to begin continue enforcement now with proper reporting and recording of every site that they go to, even if they find nothing when they get there. It's so important to keep that record. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. No one else has signed up to address the council? Is there anybody that wishes to speak to the council? Seeing none, we will close the public information, or public participation session. Next item on the agenda, resignations and appointments. Joe Perella has submitted his resignation for the Harbor Management Commission. On appointments, we have 2 appointments to the Harbor Management Commission. I'd like to move them together, Alan L. Kibbe and Christopher L. McDonald. Do I have a motion? Mr. Kaidias.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting Mr. McDonald, but I have known Mr. Kibbe for several years now, and the best way I guess I could describe him is not the recreational voter, more of the person that you would follow into the harbor with dense fog and he'd get you where you need to be. And I know him to have extensive leadership and a role with the local marina. And he deals with a lot of the same things the Harbor Commission deals with, such as dredging, working with deep, and so forth. So I know if he has a support this evening, and he is appointed to the Harbor Commission, he will hit the ground running, and we're lucky to have him.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. Holston.
Yes, I'd like to say that I think we're also lucky to have Chris McDonald as a nominee tonight. I think we also his very impressive resume. He's a professional engineer who has worked on projects as vast and varied as flooding prevention in the Holland Tunnel in New York. He's also been part of the design team on the Walk Bridge project here in Norwalk. I happen to know him personally as well, and I think he'll bring a very positive temperament and background to the commission. He has worked on harbor management on a smaller scale in the neighborhood of Village Creek, where we've done, dock management, dredging, the works. So I think he'd be a great addition to the harbor.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to briefly add to Mr. Austin's comments. I met Mr. McDonald a couple years ago, and at the time I had a brief discussion with him about the Walk Bridge, and I was very impressed then about his knowledge of design and the constraints that the whole project was under. And I think he'll be a great addition to the Harbor Commission because of his knowledge. And I think that'll be a real asset to the commission as well as to the city. So I strongly endorse him as well.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstention? So carries. Thank you. Next appointment is Barbara McCabe for the Bike Walk Commission. Do I have a motion, Mr. McNary?
I will make the motion to appoint Barbara McCabe to the Bike Walk Commission. And after looking at her resume and her nursing background, given how I bike ride, it was anyone else I'd like to have on the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Abstention? So carries. Are any of the appointees here?
Mr. McDonald is here.
Okay. If you'll step down, the clerk will administer your oath of office.
Oh, he is here. Sorry.
Come on down around this way is good. Either way. You can get there both ways.
I don't want to know the details.
No, he's a...
Did
I didn't even recognize you. I didn't even know you were here.
Thank you. Congratulations. Congratulations.
He lied to me, told me you were
I
not
don't,
here.
you look all dolled up and cleaned up. You cleaned up.
Scrub that nicely.
Well, it's for the same commission, so I'm going to ask you when I say the word "you," just say your name. And raise your right hand, please. You. Having been appointed as a member of the Harbor Management Commission of the City of Norwalk, do solemnly swear or affirm that you will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of said office according to your best skill and judgment, so help you God, or upon the pains and penalties of perjury.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yes, congratulations.
I'm going to ask you to sign. I'm going to ask you to sign both of these, two here and here. So you just have a pen for you. You can keep one, and then,
Thank you. Just have a couple of comments under Mayor's comments, Mayor's remarks. This Friday, April 26th, is Arbor Day, and the Wolf Pit Elementary School will be observing the occasion at 1:15 p.m. DPW staff and members of the Tree Advisory Commission and I will join the students for this annual celebration of spring. We generally plant a tree. The children come out and make posters. They write little essays about why planting trees is important and how important trees are to us. So it's always a nice event. Certainly some of the Common Council members have joined us in the past, and hopefully some will join us this Friday as well. Saturday, April 27th, we will be having the Mayor's annual City of Norwalk and Keep Norwalk Beautiful Day, inviting residents and members of the business community to join the annual citywide spring cleanup. This year, instead of meeting up at Lowe's, we're going to be meeting at outside of City Hall. We'll hand out gloves, bags, T-shirts, and litter pickup tools while supplies last. Individuals or teams can choose a location such as a neighborhood, local park, or beach, business area, schoolyard, or shoreline for cleanup. All are welcome. And I attended an event this past Saturday at the library, and it was run by Audrey Corazon and others. And the idea was every day is Earth Day. Ms. La Rochella was on the panel. Every day is Earth Day, not just April 22nd. If we want to sustain Mother Earth and have her take care of us, we need to take care of her. And it's the little things that we need to do to educate how to make sure that our streams, our rivers, our harbor is being maintained properly, keeping clean, learning what we can do and not do in order to keep the water clean, keeping little garbage bags and litter bags in your car, not throwing cigarette butts outside on the sidewalk. People who own restaurants and bars, make sure they put things outside so when people step outside to smoke, you can throw your cigarette butt in a can. All these things are so important because every little bit of trash or debris can cause irreparable harm. And as you know, we just, going into effect July 8th, I believe it is our ban, plastic bag ban in the city of Norwalk. And we're also exploring, thank you to Mr. Livingston and others on the council, the banning of plastic straws. Now, all these things count. It may seem like we're doing a little bit here in Norwalk, but if Norwalk leads the way in Fairfield County, and then Fairfield County leads the way in Connecticut, and Connecticut leads the way in the country, and our nation leads the way in the world, we can make a huge difference. So please participate, make every day Earth Day, adopt a spot in your neighborhood when you're out walking, pick up debris, and do all those little things that seemingly don't do a lot, but they really do. Next item, May 15th is the deadline. Thank you, Councilman Burnett, for reminding me. For applying for senior or disabled elderly or disabled tax relief in the city of Norwalk. If you're not sure what you must do, you can certainly call my office or get on the city website. We will assist you in any way that we possibly can to make sure that you get all the tax breaks that you are entitled to. Mr. Livingston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the first item, I propose moving item 7A to the end of the meeting unless there's any objection. That is the Corporation Council executive session.
6A.
6A, I apologize, yes, 6A to end unless there's any objection. Hearing none, turn now to Mr. Igneri, who shall be reading the consent calendar this evening. As a reminder, for those people interested in a particular item on the agenda, if it is read and approved by the council, there will be no further discussion, and the item is approved. Mr. Igneri?
Good evening. Item on the consent calendar is item 7A1. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to enter into an agreement with Darrell Woolsey for the use of Brian McMahon High School track field by Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation for the JDRF One Walk Fairfield to be held on Sunday, October 20th, 2019, from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. set up to begin at 5 a.m. with tear down no later than 2 p.m. on Sunday, October 20th. Estimated audience, 1,000. Item 7A2, authorizes the mayor, Harry W. William, to execute a 5-year lease extension with the Pastime Social and Athletic Club for the use of a small portion of land along Seaview Avenue. Remaining terms of the agreement to be remain unchanged. Item 7B1, accept and approve the report of the Claims Committee dated April 11, 2019. Item B2, for informational purposes only, there was a narrative on the tax collections dated April 11, 2019, which I will add were very good. B3, for informational purposes only, monthly tax collectors report dated March 2019. Item B5, discuss and approve fiscal year 2019-20 Water Pollution Authority budget. Item B6, appointment of the auditors to audit fiscal year 2018-19. That is it.
Thank you, Mr. McNary. Is there any discussion on the consent calendar? Mr. Hempstead?
Thank you. I didn't ask for it to be pulled off. I did vote against in committee the Water Pollution Authority budget. I just wanted to explain the reason I do that is that I'm an advocate for trying to get people that use water to pay for the water they use versus a flat fee. I really think from an environmental standpoint, until we ever achieve that in this city based on usage, to find balance between a senior citizen having 1 or 2 persons in house versus a family of 5 or 6 in house paying the same rate. And the only way we seem to ever incentivize anybody on reducing water consumption or any kind of consumption is usually if it's a higher price, as in when gas goes to $4 a gallon, it tends to drop usage on gas. But I'll be supporting the budget at this stage of the game, but I just wanted to make sure that that was on record. I didn't want to pull it off consent. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hempstead. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. And it goes to show when you don't complete your notes that you might leave something out under my remarks. I wanted to introduce Mr. Henry Daskowitz, our new Chief Financial Officer. He will be starting on April 29th. If you want to come down and just say a few words, Mr. Daskowitz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm excited to join. Norwalk has a great reputation, and I'm looking forward to joining and working with all of you to make it even better from a financial point of view.
Welcome aboard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we go to Mr. Burnett, item 7B4.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that we approve the fiscal year 2019-2020 Parking Authority budget as revised.
That has been moved. Discussion?
Yes. The Parking Authority has done some really great things in terms of making the entire parking experience better for our Norwalk residents and especially for our visitors who come into Norwalk. So we really wanted to take a moment and highlight some of the good things that have gone on within the Parking Authority, and I think other members of the council have some comments they would like to make.
Okay. Mr. Kites.
Yeah, just to expand on Mr. Burnett's comments, a few years back, we saw excess amount of, well, let's just say excess, but we knew we wanted to do something about lowering the violations. In areas that we're trying to support local businesses, we're trying to revitalize. And I got to say, through the collaboration of the Parking Authority, Mrs. Hebert, Mr. Bresch, I see in the audience, we've been able to accomplish that in a few ways. And just to throw out some stats that the council and the Finance Committee recently saw were back in 16-17 that we had violations of over 27,392. And I'm happy to say year to date with the fiscal year ending in July 1st, we're down to 12,628. So that's great news. We're at a time of transition in Norwalk. Like I said, we're trying to promote local businesses. We're trying to keep people down here. And the issue was that a lot of times where you'd have some folks come in and there'd be, 2 minutes late paying their meter, getting back in time. And now what the parking authority is offering is a grace period between the expiration time and when a ticket is issued, which I think is great. And also cards are being given out in exchange for a ticket. So instead of getting a ticket when you get back to your car, you have, I forget what they're called, but courtesy cards. Thank you, Mrs. Heater. Courtesy cards are issued, which basically is saying you could have got a ticket, but you didn't. So that's great as well. So I'm glad everyone's working together, and I thank you all. Also, I thank Mr. Sirenides, the council representative on the parking authority. He's been taking time out of his busy schedule to attend parking authority meetings and keep us all in the loop. And one thing I also want to expand on is with all this development we have going in South Norwalk, that we've had a lot of issues with these large-scale projects of folks parking in our city lots and not leaving spots available for whomever. So I think we were starting to address that, and in projects of scale, we're trying to address where part of the agreement with the city and these larger developments, where the construction workers and anyone associated with that development will park. So that's also great. So I just wanted to point this out. Usually I'm a parking authority. I've had, not to say issues with what they've been doing, because they're doing exactly what they've been tasked to do, enforce our parking rules, and they've been very helpful, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Further discussion? Mr. Sirenides.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to add to Councilman Kitey's comments. Not only have the tickets gone down, the issuing of tickets, and the courtesy cards that do help out the complaints that are dramatically down about parking, they've also added the ambassador program with South Norwalk to help visitors find their way around South Norwalk, help them with any questions, help them with the meters, which were a little complicated and had problems with people using. They also help with any safety issues that might come up, as well as any car assistance. On top of that, the construction's been a major problem down there, and personally I think the parking authority has done a great job. They've put a lot of hours into trying to figure out what works best for everyone, to not slow down the construction, but also give the residents down there in the Golden Hill, primarily in Sono area, make sure that their parking isn't taken up, their driveways and roads aren't clogged, on top of the municipal lots that are there for commerce and turnaround aren't flooded with the workers. So I just want to compliment them. They've done a great job down there, and keep it up.
Thank you. Further discussion? Ms. Young?
As a District B representative, I just want to thank the Parking and Traffic Authority, and I know, Mayor, we had gone to one of those meetings where the neighbors got together and were really expressing their concerns about the parking that was in the area, Golden Hill, as has been expressed. And they really got together, and you heard them, and you responded, and I think that's a positive thing, and that's half the battle. So thank you for your efforts and your work.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of item 7B4? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Ms. Melendez, item 7C1.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 7C1, under the Ordinance Committee, approve proposed revisions to Chapter 68, noise, 68-1 through 68-15. Wow. Okay. So this...
You want to move the item first?
Yeah, I'll move that item. Sorry. I feel like it's my first time doing this. Okay. It's definitely not. So I actually had to look back to see when this first came onto the Ordinance Committee agenda, and it was February 2017, when some of the people here on this council weren't even council members. So it's a little bit crazy to think how long we've been working on it, but it's been a journey, but we finally have language in front of us that we all have worked on very hard on, and I'm excited that it's on the council floor now, and that we can, that the full council can see it and discuss it, and that you were able to hear from some members of the public. But I do really want to thank the council members on the ordinance committee from the 2015-2017 term that we started this process with, the ordinance committee members now, and the other council members that are not members of the committee that joined us for those long meetings and public hearings to be a part of this. Attorney Candela, who kept up with all of the crazy changes that we were proposing. Of course, Mr. Zwirling, the noise consultant that we hired last year, who spent countless hours talking and listening to people at City Hall, to members of the public, to us, and to our concerns, to try to make this ordinance what we want it to be in order to help all of our citizens in Norwalk. And of course, I want to thank the members of the public who have been part of this process from the very beginning, that helped us with the input and being very, sometimes it got heated at our meetings, and especially during our public comment, but it was all to get us to this point where we have some language to work with that I would say is a lot better than what we had before. So in February 2017, it became clear to us when the ordinance committee first started to go through the noise ordinance, which is the one that we have right now, that there were some issues. Obviously, we know noise is a health issue, but it's also tricky. Some businesses have to operate, which require additional noise. People have to, take care of their lawns. Houses have to be constructed. Things have to get done throughout the day in our city. So it's not something that we could just completely eliminate, but something that we really had to address. And throughout that process, a lot of things were addressed in this ordinance, and I know that some of my colleagues will speak to some of them, but I think I want to just briefly speak to the first issue that we really addressed, that we wanted to address when the ordinance committee took this on back in 2017, which was the issues down on Washington Street. And I think the biggest problem with that was that we just had 1 decibel level just to kind of cover the area, which doesn't really make sense, given that a decibel level can be measured from different areas within the actual affected area, rather. So with this new ordinance, we now have, and there are different tables within it, but the table 3 that specifically deals with Washington Street Development District, you have a decibel level that could be measured from 10 feet, the distance of 10 feet from the facility, from the from the property line of the affected person, and from inside the residence of the affected person. So I'm pleased that this of course is just one piece of this ordinance, but I'm pleased that this addresses an issue that was definitely not addressed with our past ordinance. And actually with that, to address some of the comments that were brought up tonight in our public comment, I think to say it's a nighttime cutoff or a last call for music you can still play music, you just have to play it a little lower after that time. So it's not like you have to cut off the music completely at that time, that's when the nighttime hours start. Anyway, so just moving forward, because I know other people have things to say, I just have 2 brief amendments that I'll make at the end when everyone else has had the opportunity to speak to this. Just kind of typo amendments that I'll do at the end. But I just, again, wanted to, and I've said this in the press and at our ordinance meeting, just because it says that, this goes into effect 10 days after the Common Council approves it doesn't mean that, actually we amended it to say it, but just a reminder that we have to submit it to DEP, and after their approval, that's then 10 days after their approval that this would go into effect. So I think anytime we deal with any ordinance, it's important to clarify when something goes into effect. So with that, I'll leave my amendments till the end and have my colleagues.
Thank Thank
the
you.
opportunity.
Mr. Livingston?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to first commend Ms. Melendez for all of her hard work in pushing this through. I mean, this has been, as you said, a 2-year process, but you've stayed on top of it and assured that it got done and got done well. I mean, nothing's going to be, not everybody's going to be happy, of course, and maybe that's a sign of a successful ordinance. But there were so many different factors to consider, so many different areas in the city to consider, from the businesses to the residents, to the night versus day and everything else. And I think you did a really good job of working this through. I just want to highlight a couple points. One is we added in response to some of the concerns people in residential neighborhoods have had regarding things like heavy equipment, pile drivers, rocks chipping, and that type of thing. And we know how unbearable that can be for people who have to live through this hour after hour, day after day. And we have added a provision to limit that type of work in residential zones as well as noise-sensitive zones, which I'll come back to in a second, to weekdays, Monday through Friday, other than federal holidays, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And so what we're doing is trying to balance the need to keep construction going and keep the city vibrant with the health concerns of the residents. And I think this does this in a fair way. And I just want to note the noise-sensitive zone, which was a concept in the original, the current ordinance, if you will, that provides that the Director of Health can designate an area to be a noise-sensitive zone. So even though we've covered the residential area in this specific provision, residential zones, this permits the Board of Health to designate another area as a noise-sensitive area where noise problems are likely to occur or known to exist. So it gives a little more flexibility. And I just want to add a couple other things. Obviously, having an ordinance like this, it's critical to be enforced. And we recognize that. We have gone out for estimates in terms of the training and equipment, and I think we'll be coming back for a special appropriation to get this done, because that is obviously the next step. So that will be something we'll be doing next. And I also think that we also need to see if we can get some more, maybe some modifications to the building code to sort of to move forward with our code that addresses noise issues before they even come up in the construction. So with that, I support this wholeheartedly.
Further discussion? Mr. Hempstead.
Thank you. I too want to thank the Chairwoman, Ms. Melendez, for her perseverance on this and leadership, and because, like you said, you started the term before, so you carried it through in 2 terms. It is a difficult subject. I'm glad everybody saw the wisdom of bringing in an expert for all of us who don't quite understand this stuff, and I think it would. And we brought an expert on that was willing to compromise when we asked him, what do you think if we change this to that? And I think that was an important aspect of this, that the expert even said, well, that might work, so try that. And the key to the success to this is to make sure the funding and training is there when asked for and needed. That landlords need to be responsible in enforcing their tenants to either they as a landlord modify their building to bring it up to code for noise standards, and making sure their tenants properly respond to the ordinance that's out there, and making sure that they maintain a level of decency for peace and quiet for people that should be expected. Just a suggestion, no, I think the leadership is that, because this is what happened to the last one. Nobody looked at it. The 18 years when they did the first one, 18 years when they revised that one, and now we're 18 years later instituting a revised one after that. That maybe health and welfare should be the committee that maybe on a monthly, like we do with the wastewater treatment plant, et cetera, just reviews noise complaints to see how it's going. Because we need to be flexible. We don't want to put also people who learn those trades that we're trying to monitor out of business either. Getting work, heavy duty working in that, sometimes it's not the nicest thing to have, but it's also a very necessary thing to have happen in our community. So I'm just suggesting that, as far as a monthly monitoring, since the police department, it's part of the Health, Welfare, Public Safety Committee, would be to get the monthly reports to see how we're doing, and come back a year from now and say, is it working, is it not working? But thanks for And thanks for the council president, because I know, Mr. Livingston, you had a lot of behind-the-scenes work with the legalese of all this, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Further discussion? Ms. Young?
So I want to thank Councilwoman Melendez for her leadership with this effort, and all the other committee members. So I'm a newbie, so this predates me being on the council, so it's taken a while to catch up with what's all presented before us. But I do know that in 2017, as a resident in South Norwalk, I know that there have been issues and concerns expressed about the light industrial properties abutting residential properties. And I do recall that Mr. Swirling did a site visit with Councilman Dumas and Diane Larcella, and one of his comments were about the lack of efficient buffering between the light industrial yards and the residents. And that's still a concern, and it will always be a concern. But I'm kind of pleased with the section that has noise-sensitive zone identified in that, but we really need to identify what that is and how we're going to enforce that. And I do think, I heard someone else mention in the public comment section about enforcement. So we can have a great ordinance on paper, but it actually needs to be enforced effectively. So, and I also know that we did have conversations about being able to come back to the ordinance, to this ordinance, and make some improvements and add in things where we need to. But with that being said, I support the effort. We got to start somewhere, and this is a good start. And thank you.
Further discussion? Mr. Holston?
I kind of echo that the sentiment that it's a good start. I think that we agree that it's an ordinance that we can continue working on for another 2 years if we really wanted to, and nobody does. But I think this language that we have in front of us offers a meaningful improvement over the existing language. I agree about, some of the challenges that we have in South Norwalk, where we have residential neighborhoods that are right up against, without any buffer, light industrial or commercial zones, and it makes it a little tricky. But I think that the language here allows the Department of Health to accommodate that by designating noise-sensitive zones, and I think that as long as we are able to follow through on that, it should allow South Norwalk residents to enjoy the same protections as the rest of the city. I just wanted to respond to a couple of the comments from the public tonight. I think that I agree with all the sentiments about making sure that we balance people's health with the economic health of the city. But I think that it's important to note that the current ordinance that is currently in effect has nighttime hours starting at 8 p.m. Sunday through Sunday. And we're extending that to 10 p.m. Sunday through Wednesday, 11 p.m. on Thursday, and 1 a.m. on Friday. So we're actually extending the hours at which, for example, bars on Washington Street can play loud music, which I think is a great compromise that allows them to do their business and allows people to live in some relative peace. So I think that's worth noting, that the current ordinance is actually more restrictive than what's being proposed. And I think it's important to think about some of the exceptions. For example, emergency work. I don't think anybody here would agree with work being done at 3 a.m. anywhere. Again, the language we have in front of us says that has to be designated as an emergency for it to proceed, and I think that that allows some context into how the language is enforced. Same thing for leaf blowing and landscaping. Again, is it perfect? No, but again, we have restricted the hours from 8 to 6 on Monday through Friday, 9 to 6 on the weekends, and that's an improvement from the current language. I agree with everybody that the language could be perfect, but still would not be useful unless it's properly enforced. And again, I really appreciate that the language we have in front of us specifies both training and equipment and noise control administrators, which is not as clearly defined in the existing language, to allow us some structure to actually enforce it. I think the next step, honestly, and I agree with Councilwoman Young, is to have some of this inform some of our future zoning practices so that we don't have residential neighborhoods sitting right next to light industrial or commercial without a buffer. Otherwise, I support this.
Further discussion? Ms. Melendez, would you like to amend or make your corrections?
So just, yeah, I would actually just call them corrections. So under table 1, in the footnote number 2, I mean, we've been talking about it the way that we originally approved it and discussed it in committee, but it actually says daytime hours are extended up to 10 p.m. on Saturday through Wednesday, but that's supposed to be Sunday through Wednesday. So that's the first correction. And then the second correction is in 68-10K. We just need to add and to the second to last sentence because it was taken out by accident. And that's it.
68-10A.
Okay.
Okay.
Second to last line.
Second to last line.
Okay.
Sentence.
So, all in favor of the approval of the noise ordinance as corrected by Councilwoman Melendez, please signify.
It's not a separate amendment.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Wait.
Carried unanimously.
No, Mr.
Sorry?
Dumas.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see.
Yes.
Mr. Dumas.
I didn't particularly care about what was just said by Doug Hempstead about not allowing people to go ahead and work in those areas as far as contractor yards, because I've been against the contractor yards from the beginning. And I would appreciate that, and you're saying that homeowners that should have buffers for their house or do something to put in their house to stop the noise and everything like that. We wouldn't have to do that if we wouldn't allow the contractor yards there. And this is what's happening. And if you go up and down South Main Street and all the streets over there, and if you take a ride, Mr. Hempstead, take a ride and look at what's going on all these streets and adjacent streets to South Main Street, you would see. And also, there's 30 contractor yards there that are in our area that are illegal. So this is why I'm not for any of it. Thank you.
Further discussion. So let's take the vote again.
Yeah, let's take the.
All in favor of the noise ordinance as corrected by Councilwoman Melendez, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Dumas, you're abstaining?
Yes.
So it carries 14 affirmative, 1 nobody opposed, and 1 abstention. Okay, next item, item 6A1, I believe, and I need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Livingston, all in favor? We are in executive session at 8:30. 8:31, just changed. Good? Okay. It is now 9:59 p.m. We are now out of executive session. During executive session, no motions were made, no votes were taken. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Mr. Serenides, motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned at 10 o'clock. I don't know. It's up to...